Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Things We Know. Today, we are talking about relationships, but not from a perspective that we talk about very often. This is not about how they start or how they look when they're working, but what actually happens over time when they don't. A lot of women listening are in some kind of transition now. They're questioning a relationship, healing from one, or thinking about what they want next. And those questions can feel complicated, especially when you don't always trust your own instincts.
Yeah, that's why this conversation feels timely and important because instead of starting with ideal scenarios, our guest has spent nearly 2 decades seeing relationships at the point where things are breaking down. And what she's done with that experience is step back and look at the patterns that lead people there in the first place.
So I'm going to take a beat right here because honestly, Sarah, I did not ask you how to pronounce your last name. So how do you say your last name?
I was going to give you a stab at it and see if you got it. No,
Well,
I'm
the funny
kidding.
thing is in my head, I've been calling you Intelligencer. You
Oh,
know?
oh, I was
Intelligator?
close.
Intelligator?
Intelligator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right. So, Sarah Intelligator is a divorce attorney based in Los Angeles, and she's been practicing family law since 2008. Over the years, she's worked with thousands of couples navigating the end of their relationships, and that perspective has given her a very clear view of what tends to repeat.
Sarah also brings a more holistic lens to this work, which I love. She's been a yoga instructor for over 2 decades and really bridged those two worlds in a way that helps people not just navigate divorce, but ideally make more intentional choices earlier on.
Hmm. She's the author of Live, Laugh, True Love, where she breaks down the patterns she sees most often and how to recognize them before you find yourself deep in them. Sarah, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I'm excited about this. This is such a cool direction you took things. So we like to start here. When you hear your work described like that, especially through the lens of patterns and relationships over time, how does that feel for you? Like when you're reflecting on what you're doing with your work?
I think, on the one hand, I love to help people. So, being a divorce attorney is it seems sort of counterintuitive, like you're helping people get divorced, which has such a negative spin. But I think I help people through that difficult time, but what I really, my work has sort of morphed into is trying to help people prevent getting to my office in the first place, because
Mhm.
ultimately that's where people don't want to land. So it feels good. It feels meaningful.
I love
That's
that. I
great.
remember when you reached out to us, and that was sort of your tagline. I was like, oh, we definitely need to have you on. Okay, so before we get into patterns, though, we'd love to sort of understand your path a little bit more. What drew you into family law in the first place?
It's a great question because I had no interest in family law.
Really?
Um, yeah, and so I feel like it was almost sort of a calling, like in hindsight, when I look back on it, like it was meant to be that I was meant to help these people going through their divorces, but also these people who I don't ever want to go through a divorce.
Mm.
I went to law school because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I thought it was a great degree to have because nobody can mess with me if I'm a lawyer, right?
Mm.
So that's sort of what led me there. And then when I was in law school, I thought to myself, well, if I do end up being a lawyer, I would really like to do criminal defense. And I had my reasons for that. And I took pretty much only criminal law classes in law school. And I worked for the district attorney as a clerk during law school as well. So it was really like I was headed toward criminal defense or some aspect of criminal law. And then when I graduated from law school, I took the bar exam. I thought, okay, well, I might as well take the bar exam. I've gotten this far. I passed. And so then I thought to myself, okay, I guess I'm going to be a lawyer when I grow up. And I applied for a job with the public defender's office, but there was a hiring freeze
Mm.
and also a hiring freeze at the district attorney's office. And those are really the only two pathways to going into private defense work.
Mm.
So I thought to myself, well, I need to get a job. My mom she's an attorney. She knew somebody who was looking for a part-time family law clerk. Again, I had never even, my only exposure really to family law was on the bar exam. We had a community property section on the California bar exam. So I really knew nothing about family law. I got the job. My mom happens to practice family law, so I was calling her on a daily basis, asking her questions every second. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I worked for a firm for about 5 years, hated it, thought it was really soul crushing work just because I think of the way that it was being practiced where I was at. It wasn't being practiced in the way that I would practice it or that I do practice it. And then I went out onto my own and I still didn't really necessarily want to be a lawyer. And so I maintained some clients so that I could pay my bills, but I was kind of trying to think about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. And in the process of doing that, it came to me, as you mentioned, I'd been a yoga teacher. And I realized that I have this very unique way of practicing law and this very unique skill set to help people navigate difficult times in their lives. So I sort of bridged those two worlds. I thought, okay, I'm going to be a holistic divorce and family law attorney. And that doesn't, I know that sounds like it has like a woo-woo connotation to it, but really it's just that I'm looking at the whole person because family law is something so deeply personal. And I want to make sure that I'm not only fulfilling my ethical obligations to my clients and doing what I need to do in that regard, but that I'm also helping guide the human being through a
Mm.
deeply vulnerable and emotional and difficult time in their lives and trying to get them to a better place when they leave my office. That does involve a lot of hand holding. I mean, I have clients call me all the time and they preface the call with, look, I know you're not my therapist, but
Oh, wow.
I bet. I bet.
I'm not a therapist, but I do sort of end up wearing that hat, so to speak. And that's where my work as a yoga teacher and again, guiding people through difficult times in their lives and having the skill set to do that is really instrumental.
Wow.
I I really love this. Several times on our episodes, I think Lisa or I have said, we've come to realize like sometimes it isn't, oh, I'm so sorry. Sometimes it's congratulations, you got through this and you were like respectful of each other. And, just because it ended didn't mean it wasn't a success. It just had an ending. Right. And so,
Right.
how lovely that someone like you has all those skills and that intention to bring to it. So I'm curious over the years sitting with so many couples in that process, what started to stand out to you that led to you wanting to write a book?
The fact that the patterns that I saw in all of these relationships were so similar, and I had been through my own divorce, and I saw those same patterns in my own divorce. And also, I think that I'm remarried, and my husband, he actually pointed out to me that when people hear that I'm a divorce attorney, they automatically want to talk to me about relationships. And so they will start sort of, mentioning some things about relationships, and I'll start saying things. And he observed, I was oblivious. I was just like doing my thing, doing what I do. And he said, you start talking about this stuff, people really lean in, they listen, they gravitate, they're captivated by what you were saying. And he would watch, like, I would be talking to one person, and then other people would be around, they'd come in and they'd start listening and then maybe asking questions too. And suddenly I was like, Socrates on the mount. Like I'm joking about that, but like people would like really listen. He goes, you have to write a book because the things you're saying, like people really want to know. You have this body of knowledge that people want
Mm.
to they want to know it. And so it kind of it felt right.
That's
Mm.
really fascinating. I totally get that. I used to be in the diet industry, and as soon as somebody found out, it was like, "Phoom,"
Yeah.
people just right on me. So I totally get that. Okay, so when you look across all those years, or when your husband started pointing these out, like, what are the common threads that show up again and again?
So yeah, and I talk about those in my book. I distilled them down into six what I call F words, which is short for fail factors, but
Oh,
they're
okay.
the different F words, not the F words we think of. But there's six F words that are the patterns that I see in all failed relationships. Like these things are either there or not there, and I can talk about each one, or I can just mention them however you want to, whatever you think is best.
I kind of would like, I mean,
Yeah.
we want people to buy your book. So maybe do you
Yeah.
want to just give us a couple so that they find out what
Yeah.
the other are by buying the book?
Yeah, that's fine. I can tease them. I'll mention all six and then I
Okay.
can talk about a few that I think are really important. So, the six are fundamental values, fear,
Mhm.
foundation, fairy tale, fixing, and family. Okay.
Ooh, not finances. I thought you were going to say finances. Okay.
Oh, there's a seventh. I think, you know what, though? I think finances can really be wrapped up
Sure.
into fundamental values and
Yes.
foundation. And I'll
Oh,
talk
that's
about
interesting.
fundamental values first so that you kind of see why I think that is. So,
Okay.
um, these are listed in no particular order in my book, and I obviously give a lot of examples in the book of real life couples that I've seen and how these things have not worked out and how they would have worked out if things were different. But fundamental values, I talk about it first because I do think that it's sort of it is the thing without which the rest of the relationship cannot really function.
Mm.
Another F word, but. Um, but so fundamental values, when I talk about it, it's not our interests. It's not, our superficial sort of things we gravitate toward. It's really who we are at our core. And I think it's things like that we were raised with, things that we value as deeply intrinsic to who we are. So for example, somebody might be very religious. And that religion, they want a partner who is the same faith, who wants to raise children in the same faith. That is a fundamental value. That drives their
Yeah.
life, their decisions, right? Like things that drive how we view the world, how we operate in the world, our goals, things like that, right? So the reason that this is important is because people with similar fundamental values, it might be because they were raised similarly with similar backgrounds, or it might be for other reasons, but um, people with similar fundamental values are going to seek to navigate life in a similar way.
Mm.
And people with very dissonant fundamental values are going to seek to navigate life in a very different way. And while I don't think that this is really as big of a deal if people decide not to have children, I think once they do decide to have children, it makes a big difference. And this is probably one of the reasons that we see more divorces happen after people have children. Um,
Mm.
the average length of average duration or average length of a marriage in the United States is about 7 years. And I think I might be misquoting this, but I think on average, most couples have their first child about 2 or 3 years into the marriage. And then, if they have a second, right? So we're looking at that 7 year number and it sort of makes sense why.
Wow.
Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I think that
Yeah.
because when you are trying to raise children, your values, that comes into play. Not only you're trying to
Totally.
instill values in them, but the way you parent is a reflection of your value system. And so
Yeah.
where the two people are not aligned in their values, they're going to want to parent very differently. They're going to be critical of each other's parenting. And that's where we talk about, finances. It's also like it's sort of part and
Sure.
parcel of fundamental values. Like, how do you view money? How do you view career? All of those things are part of your fundamental values. So that's why it's number one and the most important. And I think that where people do not share fundamental values, no matter how attracted to one another you may be, no matter how blissful everything is when you're dating or you were just recently married or the first few years of your marriage, over time it's going to fall apart.
Mm.
I mean, that makes complete and utter sense. It's almost like you could stop there.
Yeah,
I'm I'm
drops mic.
I- I'm struck right out of the gate of like this feels like a book that needs to be read before you get engaged.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean the book is really listen, I've had people who are married read the book and they loved it because they thought that it was a really powerful like reflective tool on the relationship. But yeah, I think ideally this is for people who either are dating and looking for a relationship. Maybe they're thinking about marriage and they don't know whether this is the right person for them. Maybe they're engaged, but it's still like this is, there's still time to get out if it's not right. And I think it's also really helpful for people who have gone through a divorce and are looking to reflect upon what
Hmm.
led to that divorce and the decisions they made.
And learning to go forward.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that they can find a meaningful relationship because it's never too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
if someone's listening and thinking like, oh gosh, I don't want to end up there. And it's funny because I'm just thinking about this very popular book that's out right now, Strangers, by Belle Burden. I just read really quick, and it's a true memoir of a marriage that fell apart, where she admits she overlooked pink and red flags
Hmm.
early on about finances, right? That's why I was like wondering that. It's like,
Yeah.
what are those early signs that something is off, that people either in the engaged process or early in the marriage, if they want to course correct?
I think that, and that actually is a really good segue to the next F word, which is fear. And
Mm.
I think that most people deep down inside see the pink flags, the red flags, they see all the flags. And they're so afraid to be alone, or they don't think that they'll find someone else, or they don't think they'll find someone better, or
Mm.
whatever the fear is talking in their ear. And so
Mm.
I find I really genuinely, because people tell me after the fact, like, I saw this, I knew this, but they ignore it because their fear is telling them to ignore it. And their intuition is also screaming at them, but it's like almost like the devil and angel on the shoulder. And the fear is the little devil saying, you be quiet, because, and this is kind of the analysis I give fear in the book in a sort of more philosophical way. I guess it's a little bit more esoteric way to help people try to overcome that fear. And that is that fear is one of those things that we've learned to trust. Fear has been our greatest protector throughout our
Mm.
lives. Fear has told us, like the stove is hot, don't touch that. You're going to burn yourself, right? You are on the beach and you see a shark fin. Don't go in that water. You're going to get eaten alive, right? So fear protects us. And because it has kept us safe our whole life, we trust it. So when fear is telling us you're going to be alone, don't do this is scary, don't do this, we listen because we trust it. But if we take a step back and think about it, all those examples, fear is trying to protect us in the here and the now, in this instantaneous moment. It's almost like a fight or flight, right? Fear is protecting you from this very moment so you don't get hurt right now.
Mm.
Fear isn't thinking about you in the future. It's not thinking about you 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 50 years down the road, right? Fear just doesn't want you to get hurt right now. Your intuition, however, and your intelligence, um, that is trying to protect you for the 50 years down the road. And so yes, it's so much more powerful and comforting to listen to fear. But
Mm.
if we sort of take a step back and in a kind of intellectually rationalize it and understand this, then we can say, okay, be quiet, fear. I get it. I get what you're trying to do. Thanks so much. Thanks for keeping me safe. But you're not really concerned with my future, and I am. And so I'm going to listen to my intuition. I'm going to trust my gut, even if that's the scarier option, because I don't want to it's sort of like delayed gratification. I don't want to save the hurt for later, so I don't have to feel hurt now. I'd rather feel the hurt now
Right.
and have the good stuff later. So that's sort of how I, teach people to overcome their fear.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
fascinating because there's like two instincts. I mean, as coaches, we talk about all the time. We call it the critter brain. And it is the part of your brain that is trying, it is a part of your brain that is trying to keep you safe. And so but I love this sort of addition to it of that it's keeping you safe in the here and now, where if you start really paying attention to your intuition, you can see that that's farther down. There's better things down the way, even if it's going to be
Right.
hard in the moment. I think that's
Yeah.
really fascinating. But then when you decide to leave, and again, Carrie and I, we know people, we know women, it's a change in identity. And so, what have you seen women do to rebuild after that?
Um, it sort of depends on the situation, but I can say with absolute certainty that everyone is always better off when they're done than they were when they were in it. And it takes time sometimes. It can be a roller coaster, both emotionally and financially, depending on your circumstances. I know that for me personally, it was a big roller coaster and it took time. And, but ultimately, I'm so grateful personally for my own divorce and that experience that I had because that relationship, although my ex-husband's a lovely person, was not right for me. And so my current husband is amazing, but I would have never even given him the time of day if I didn't make that decision and then end up divorced and have to work on myself and reflect upon what led me there and all of that. And so I think there's some gratitude to be had for that as an opportunity for personal growth. And I do see that in so many people who, they go, it's almost like we learn the most in life from the most difficult and painful situations. It's our greatest teacher, pain. And it can be in a negative way, but it can also be in a very beautiful and positive way if you view it that way. And I think everyone should.
Mm,
I agree.
totally.
But it takes a
So,
minute to get there.
It does. It does. But in the grand scheme of your life,
Yeah.
it's worth the investment because it's, a year, a few years, whatever it is of growing pains for you ultimately, it's like a little cocoon where the caterpillar
Yeah.
is becoming a butterfly. And so, yeah, you're in this kind of mushy cocoon, but then you ultimately come out and spread your wings and you're a beautiful butterfly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
mm, I love that. So let's talk about what comes next, whether someone leaves a relationship or just decides they want something different. Let's say they're reading your book and they're like, oh, I'm going to put this stuff in play now. There's this
Ooh,
moment where they have
Yeah.
to start over, right?
right.
So, like, what do you wish everyone would do differently the next time around?
I wish that everybody would understand their self-worth and hold out for a relationship that is worthy of them. I think people sell themselves short, partially out of fear, partially because they don't think that they deserve better, because they haven't necessarily worked on themselves and gotten to a point where they know that they deserve better and truly feel that. Because I think everybody deserves to love and be loved in a healthy way. But I don't think many people believe that. And I think
Mm,
that people feel that, oh, well, I should just accept any companion who loves me or likes me or shows me any sign of affection and people settle. And I don't think
Mm.
anyone should settle. I don't think we should set the bar so ridiculously high that we're not able to date anyone. That's also sort of probably fear protecting
yeah.
us against potential hurt. But I think that we do need to set it high and realistically high.
I love
Mm,
that. I think, but again, it strikes me because if you're in that mushy cocoon moment, right? Like if you don't, I just wonder how many women go, well, that one failed, so I'm just going to take the next guy that, the next guy that says
Yeah.
he loves me because because they haven't gotten to the outside part where they actually realize that this was all for the best and everything happens as it should. And
Yeah.
so what a crunchy moment. What do you think people tend to focus on that actually doesn't matter as much as they think they do? Like, what are they overlooking that really does matter in the next relationship, whether it's with themselves or another person?
Looks and hobbies.
Ooh, hobbies. Looks I get. So you don't think hobbies there's like fundamental.
I do. I
Okay.
do. I just think that hobbies, to the extent that they're superficial or transient
Ah,
or mutable because we are evolving and changing, like something I liked 10 years ago might not necessarily be that interesting to me. But this is a really good distinction to make about fundamental values and interests, which is there might be some deeper fundamental value underlying a hobby or an interest. So,
mm,
for instance, I use this example a lot because I think it's a really good one. So, when you're in your early 20s and you decide that you want to backpack through Europe and travel the world and have no responsibilities, right? You might think my fundamental value is travel.
mm,
mm,
But then ultimately you decide, okay, I want to get married, I want to have kids, I want to settle down. And so now you're not really in a position to travel like you once did, or maybe at all. Um, and so traveling is no longer then really a fundamental value. But if we look at what was underlying that wanderlust, it's the fundamental value maybe of adventure. And maybe
Mm.
that need for adventure carries over into your 30s. Even when you have kids, you can still be adventurous. You can still, once you're married. So somebody who maybe their fundamental value of adventure that is underlying that need for travel needs to make sure they don't find a partner who's a homebody, who doesn't just wants routine. That some people love that. Some people love routine. They love to stay home. That person is not going to be fundamentally aligned with somebody who has a sense of adventure and wants to be on the go all the time. But if we just simply look at travel in a 20-year-old, then we're not identifying the fundamental value. And that's where I say hobbies can be misleading.
Mm.
Okay,
So,
makes sense.
yeah.
I was just thinking, it's, I mean, we sort of laugh about it. I grew up in a very Catholic family, and everyone laughs about like this whole pre-Cana thing people have to do. They have to like, for some people, it's like several classes. For my husband and I, it was like an entire day, 30 something years ago. But there is something really valuable that you're offering for people who maybe aren't, forced into that. That's like work through these things before you get married. Like this is what this is making me think through. Like we did sit down and have to talk about our childhood homes and the
Yeah.
things that we did. And at the time we were like, what is this about? But we look back at that and realize it was super valuable to like be kind of sitting in a situation where we were having to answer things we would not have asked each other. I'm super curious to like, what do you see? And you're clearly younger than us. We're Gen X, and it's sort of like not the norm for people our age to who have gotten married to like be committed to working on themselves, right? Like their own personal growth. And what I always want to say to my younger self, or to like all young people getting married, and like luckily it's working out for us. It's working out for Lisa and Darren too. But like, make sure that you both know you're not going to be married to the same person, that you're both going to grow and change, right? Do you run into that sometimes? Like one person just didn't want the other person to change at all?
Yes. And this is where I come back to children. And I
Mm.
often find it in men. And I hear men say when women have a baby, she changed.
Mm.
And the answer is both yes and no. Yes, literally, there is science to support this. The neuroplasticity of the brain, the woman's brain changes when she gives birth, when she's breastfeeding, because now she has to be wired to keep a human being alive. So her focus shifts exclusively, almost like tunnel vision, to this baby. And so everything else around it, including maybe her relationship and her husband, are sort of marginalized a little bit because literally her physiology has changed. But at the same time, no, because her fundamental values are the same. She is not. So that's where I say fundamental. I keep coming back to this like it's important or something. But this is where I
You
say
should write a book about
I
that.
should, all right? Um, her hobbies and interests and people's hobbies and interests might change over time. I can certainly see that with myself, as I've, had children and as I've grown up and and I see that. But at the same time, my fundamental values are still the same. And in some ways, because my husband and I are so aligned in our fundamental values, we've sort of grown together, even as we've grown to be more individually different. We've still like, it's almost like we've shed the younger versions of ourselves to become even closer, um, because our fundamental values are the glue that holds us together in that sense. As we like become more grown up and more responsible, and the stuff we did when we were younger isn't as important to either one of us, right? Our focus is more on our family and our children. So yeah, but I think that when I hear it a lot, I hear it a lot from men, and I don't doubt them. I don't doubt that their wives have changed because they have physiologically, they have changed. But I always find that to be almost like like an insecurity that's not addressed because
Mm,
yeah, okay, she's not paying attention to you as much. I get that. And that we shouldn't neglect our relationships because we have children. I think there's a huge component to nurturing the relationship like a plant. You got to water it so it stays alive, right? But I also think that there needs to be an element of like sort of we're in this together and laughing it off and sort of being that. And this is when I talk about foundation as one of the other F words, I break it down into five categories. Like foundation, I liken it to the foundation of a house. So you need a foundation of your relationship and it supports your relationship. And I break it down into five pillars. If you think about the foundation of a house, it has like beams holding it up.
mhm,
And each of these beams needs to be in place to hold the relationship up. And those pillars, I break them down into respect, communication, teamwork, honesty, and trust. And if one gets
mm,
knocked over, a couple others might get knocked over. And these are things that are sort of, you always need to be attentive to them. I feel like everything else needs to be in place in order for a relationship to move forward. But I think that the foundation constantly needs to be worked at. And so this is kind of where we get into that territory where, you know, when someone has a child and a husband is saying, you know, oh, my wife has changed or whatever, like we need to come back to teamwork and
mhm.
respect and knowing that we're doing this together, you know, as a unit, as opposed to now we're being pitted against each other because of this tiny human that is has taken my wife's attention from me. Like that's a very immature place to come from, I think. But I see it a lot, and you know, and we need to be reflective and cognizant of that, as you know, especially as men. But as women, we need to also be cognizant of, you know, okay, I get it. I'm going through all this. I'm really tired. I have nothing left to give. I'm giving to everyone else. But also, you know, my partner is still my partner, and I need to nurture that, even if it's something as simple as holding a hand when sitting and watching TV at the end of the day, a hug in the middle of the day for no reason, spontaneously, making a comment, you know, I know I'm so tired, but I really love you. And thanks for being, you know, by my side and being my partner through this. You know, like little things that don't take any effort go a long way. And we need to still nurture that relationship.
So Carrie and I's kids are so much older. And so it's been a long time. Like my youngest is almost 20. So it's been a long time since I've been in that moment. I can kind of relate to it, but what's cracking me up in my reality brain head is I watched The Valley and there's a couple on there that had just had a baby and the husband, or he actually they're not married. The man is just like losing his shit because they won't have sex. But the woman is like, I just
Yeah.
had a baby, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and they
You
do kind of,
try it.
well, exactly. But it's interesting that you say the thing about communication because I also then, because I'm addicted, watch the after show and they're reflecting on these episodes. And the woman says, Kristen says, you know, now I look back and I go, you're right. This was the first time he was a dad as well. I should have been more understanding. Like, and to have that communication from a grounded place and not from a tired place, because like one of the episodes
Mhm.
they try to have this conversation and it goes off the rails because they're both so exhausted and
Yeah.
angry, you know. So it's I don't know, it's that's a really fascinating piece, or example anyways, around when you have a kid and the 7 years and all of that.
It's a
Mm,
lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, just like thinking about you being in California and conversations I've been part of or overheard. Is like, do you often see or have to sort of manage and educate about how like somebody, and I'm not going to say it's always the man because it could be the woman, like someone
Yeah.
comes in and like talks about, I earned this, this is my money,
Oh,
Mm.
like
yeah.
educating people on like how you both earned that in order to like have a family and be able to work, like that kind of thing. Do you see that a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So and I actually talk about this in my book. So I'm in California. The laws in every state, family law is different in every state. So I'm licensed to practice in California, so I can talk about the law in California. California happens to be a community property state. It's in the minority in the United States, community property states, but California happens to be one. And what that means is that anything that is earned during the marriage, regardless of which partner earns it, is 50% one partner's and 50% the others. And there's exception, like if someone receives something through gift or inheritance, but that is the rule. So I have people coming to me all the time saying, well, I earned all the money, and
Mm.
or we kept completely separate accounts. So whatever is in my name is mine, whatever's in his name is his, whatever it might be. And I look at them and I'm like, well, you can certainly agree to that mutually. And if that's what you both agree to, but that's not what the law is in
Right.
California. And it makes a lot of people very angry, especially where they were the breadwinner or the primary earner during the marriage or the relationship. And but I kind of like it. And I'll tell you why. Because where people come to me, and I see this a lot. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone who keeps separate bank accounts, their marriage is going to fail because they don't view themselves as a team. But I think there's something to be said about having joint accounts and viewing your finances and your earnings as joint that I think there are many places where California gets it wrong, but I think this is one place where it gets it right
Mm.
because I think if you view yourselves as a team, your teammates playing for the same team with a common goal, then you will try to navigate, like you'll be high-fiving each other, you'll be doing things together, you'll be passing the ball to each other, if we're using a sports analogy. But if you view yourselves as on the playing for opposite teams, like this is my
Mm.
account, this is my account, we're separate, then you can be pitted against each other. Oh, this is
Yeah.
mine, this isn't yours.
Adversarial.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that there's something to be said about when you do get married, saying, well, it's all ours. It doesn't mean you cease to be an individual. You are both still individuals. I hate that phrase. Oh, you complete me. No, you're plenty complete. When you enter the relationship, you are your own person. I think a good relationship will make you the best version of yourself and inspire you to be the best version of yourself. But I don't think that anybody completes anybody. I think we're all complete going into the relationship. But I think that when you know, two heads are better than one, like we get stronger when we work together. And if we work together well, because we share fundamental values, so we are seeking to navigate obstacles in life in a similar way with the same goals in mind.
Mm. I love that. So, for someone who is listening and says, gosh, I don't want to repeat the same patterns, or maybe they're out of their first relationship and looking to move into another one, where do they actually start? What do you think the first shift is that would make a difference so that they don't repeat these patterns in relationships going
Yeah.
forward?
I'm going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, so I apologize. But I think they need to identify their own fundamental values first. And here's why.
Who knows? Some people don't know those. So I think
They
that's a
don't.
brilliant
They
where
don't.
place to
And
start.
And in my book, I actually have a few exercises in the beginning of the book to help people do this. Because if you don't know what you fundamentally value, how do you know what to look for in someone else? And then I talk about how dating should be treated as a job interview. And that doesn't mean it should be devoid of flirtation or you should walk in with a clipboard and a list of questions. But I help people, I say, first identify your fundamental values. And then there's a little exercise in the book to help, where I say, identify your fundamental value and then formulate a couple of questions that you could potentially ask to see if your date shares these fundamental values. And it doesn't mean you're
Mm.
going to go into the date with this list, but now that you've thought about it, at least you have it in the back of your mind. So the one example I give that I really like, because I think it's a really good example that is sort of tangible, is that okay? Let's say you're a devout Catholic and you go to church every Sunday and you want to marry someone Catholic, you want to raise your children Catholic, you want that person to want to go to church every Sunday, not just by force. And so you go on this date, you have no idea what this person believes, and you're chit chatting, and the person says something about, uh, hey, what are you doing on Sunday? right? Like you want to hang out on Sunday. You say, well, I usually go to church on Sunday. How do you feel about that? Like what are your thoughts on that? Why not be able to right out the gate, ask that question? Because people are too afraid to ask questions because they're afraid they're not going to get the answer they want and the other person won't like them.
Mm.
But if that person doesn't like you because you're asking if they go to church and they don't like church or religion and they're an atheist and agnostic, everything, that you shouldn't be dating that person, no matter how attractive that person is, no matter how much you share similar hobbies and interests, you're not fundamentally aligned, right? So on to the next. But many people will keep dating or they'll avoid asking the question because they don't want to hear the answer. Then they get so they get so stuck in the relationship because now you're emotionally attached and you don't want to break up because fear and all these things. So ask the questions early on, but you have to identify your own fundamental values first. And then don't be afraid to ask these questions. Like if somebody doesn't give you an answer you like or doesn't like you because of a question you're asking, that's not the right partner. And you, instead of being bummed out about it, you should be grateful that you sussed this out before you got emotionally attached.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so cool. We're going to wrap up. We want to watch the time, but I'm so curious. Like, what is like one assumption about marriage you would love to undo for young people who are like, kind of assuming things about marriage in the future?
You're really hitting these F words here.
Yeah.
So one of the F words is fairy tale. And I think that people need to disabuse themselves of the notion that the wedding is the best day of their life or that the wedding is the most important, like the pinnacle that you're leading up toward, that is the moment, like the engagement, the wedding, the proposal, the social media posts that ensue. Like none of that is important because ultimately if, you know, there's a quote by Nietzsche. I'm going to probably botch it, but it's, if you can find your why, you will find your how.
Mm.
And if your why is, oh, I just need to get married, I need to be a bride, or I need to have a wedding, then your how will be, who do I find who wants to marry me?
Mm.
But if your why is, I want to have a meaningful partnership with my teammate, with somebody who I seek to navigate life with in a very similar way, and we're very aligned in our fundamental values, then that's what your how is going to be, how do I find that? Right. And so I think people are so preoccupied with the show.
Mm.
And there's like a happily ever after component to that, which is like, well, okay, and they lived happily ever after, the end, not the end, the beginning. You have a whole life ahead of you after that. And arguably, that part of your life is going to be filled with the most obstacles and things that you need to work through together. So if you're just doing it for the wedding, doing it so you can say, oh, look, I have a ring on my finger, I have a husband, or I have a wife, or you're doing it because you just need to have children so badly that anybody will do, anybody, who's a sperm donor will essentially do, then you are going to probably end up divorced because you're getting married for the wrong reasons. And so don't place as much emphasis on the labels and the show and the doing it for other people so you can get attention and likes, but do it because you are trying to find something that is meaningful and long lasting and right for you.
Does anybody ever come into your office and then they read your book and they end up not getting divorced? Has that happened?
Maybe the opposite.
Oh no.
I actually have a client right now who read my book and decided he's been wanting to get divorced for a long time, but he
Okay.
said that it gave him the push to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And I think it's
Interesting.
for the best. I don't encourage people to get divorced, certainly, but if that is the inspiration that they need, then here I am, just
Yeah.
a home wrecker.
No, 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 no. I actually think this book sounds brilliant. I can think of like five people I want to send it to. Okay, so we always ask this because we do think music says things in a different way. So is there a song you love or something that feels like your theme song, your
Oh,
walk-on music?
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hands down, Boom Swagger by Murder City Devils.
Oh,
Oh, nice.
okay. Say more.
Well, I see you're wearing a CBGB shirt, so
I am.
maybe you'll appreciate that reference. But yeah, anything by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, or
I
anything by
love
Nick
it.
Cave in general, I'm
Yeah.
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 Anyway.
That's awesome. I love
That's
it.
awesome.
I love it. So before we wrap up, where can people find you, learn more about your work, connect with you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website, which is lafamilylawpractice.com, or they can find me on my Instagram, which is a mouthful, but it's sarah.a.intelligator.esq.
Okay.
Nice. Well, we're going to have all of that in the show notes so you can find everything easily if you're listening. And if this conversation resonated with you, listeners, share it with a friend. I'm sure, like Lisa and me, you have people who could really benefit from this wisdom. These are the conversations that help us see things more clearly and make different choices. So thanks for
Mm.
being with us, Sarah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
And thanks for writing this book. I mean, this
Yeah.
sounds really amazing. Carrie and I are both in 30-year long marriages. Might not be our book, but it might be a book for our children.
I like to hear that. Yeah.
I think this is I'm so glad you reached out to us because ever since you did, I've like we have got to get her on. I've really been looking
Yeah.
forward to this
I
interview
appreciate
a
it.
lot. Yeah,
Well, thank you.
absolutely. All right, everyone, please forward this if you can think of someone that could listen to it. Go look at all of Sarah's links, and we will be back next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.